Welcome to Seductive Chronicles. My name is Caroline, and I'm 53 years old. For most of my life, I wore the label of dependable like a second skin. I married young. I raised a wonderful son. I worked part time at the local library where the scent of old books and the gentle hush of whispered conversations filled my days. I baked banana bread so often I could do it in my sleep, and I knew my neighbors by the sound of their footsteps. Love, to me, wasn't grand gestures or stolen glances. It was loyalty, stability, a routine that never wavered. It was folding laundry while the news played softly in the background. It was making sure dinner was warm, even if no one said thank you. I believed I was content. Maybe I even told myself I was lucky. But the truth? I had simply made peace with a version of myself that never asked for more. I thought surprises were for storybooks and young lovers. That mystery and excitement had long passed me by. And then, something happened. Quietly, unexpectedly, and irrevocably. Please, if you hear nothing else today, hear this. Don't let your life become a quiet ache. Don't mistake stillness for fulfillment. Don't make the mistake I did. It was a Saturday evening in early October. One of those dusky days when the golden light fades a little too fast, and the breeze carries the whisper of the season changing. The kind of night that makes you feel nostalgic without knowing why. The house was quieter than usual. My son Daniel had gone out with friends to catch a late-night movie. My husband was away, again, on another work trip that had started to feel like more of a habit than a necessity. His absence had become a subtle hum in my life. Always there, never fully acknowledged. I was curled up on the couch in my oversized cardigan, a cup of chamomile tea warming my palms. The television played softly, but I wasn't really watching. My attention had drifted to an old photo album resting on my lap. I flipped through page after page of frozen moments. Halloween costumes, toothless grins, birthday candles half blown. I stopped on one picture that made me smile. Daniel and his best friend Evan, both about 7 years old, proudly holding a crooked Lego tower they'd built together. That photo? It had a strange kind of innocence to it. A stillness. A time capsule of simpler years. And then the doorbell rang. I assumed it was Daniel. Maybe he'd forgotten his key. But when I opened the door, I was met with someone taller, broader, older. It was Evan. His face, softly lit by the porch light, looked nothing like the boy in that photo. He had grown into his frame, stronger, more defined. His hoodie hung loosely around him, hands tucked into his pockets, his posture hesitant. "Evan?" I said, blinking in surprise. "Is everything okay?" "Hey, Mrs. Cole," he murmured with a half smile. "Sorry to drop by so late. I didn't know where else to go." There was something in his voice. Not fear exactly, but vulnerability. A weight. Without thinking, I stepped aside and gestured for him to come in. "You're always welcome here, sweetheart." He entered quietly, brushing past me. I caught a faint scent, maybe cologne, maybe the crispness of autumn. Something earthy, something unfamiliar but pleasant. I closed the door and followed him to the living room. We sat. I offered him tea, which he accepted but didn't drink. He just held the mug between his hands like he needed its warmth more than its contents. I sat across from him, watching the way his shoulders slumped, how his brow stayed slightly furrowed. "Daniel's not home," I said softly, in case that was who he came to see. "I know," he replied, then looked down. "I didn't come to see him." That made me pause. He exhaled, long and slow. "My parents are fighting again. Bad this time. I needed somewhere quiet, somewhere familiar." I felt my heart pinch. I knew the kind of ache that came from living in a house filled with noise and tension. I had lived that once too. "You're safe here," I told him gently. When he looked up at me, his eyes, so familiar yet different now, met mine. There was something in his gaze that made my breath hitch. Gratitude? Yes. But also something more, something neither of us dared name. "Thank you," he said. "You always made this place feel like home." I smiled and reached across the table, placing my hand gently over his. It was a gesture I meant to be maternal, reassuring. But the moment our skin touched, something shifted in the room. He didn't pull away. Neither did I. There was a silence, thick and weighted. A pause long enough to make the air feel charged. I pulled my hand back slowly, my thoughts racing. Maybe it was just loneliness. Maybe I was imagining things. But something in me felt awakened. Would you like to stay for dinner? I asked, needing to ground the moment. I made a roast earlier. There's more than enough. He smiled, softly, shyly. Yeah, that sounds nice. I went to the kitchen, trying to steady my heartbeat. In the reflection of the glass sliding door, I saw him still seated, watching me. That gaze again, not invasive, not inappropriate, just aware, curious, unspoken. I kept telling myself this was Evan. Sweet, polite Evan who used to call me Miss C and drag mud into my kitchen without apology. But that version of him felt like a shadow now. Tonight, he was something else entirely. Dinner passed with quiet conversation and the occasional soft laugh. I lit a candle. Out of habit or instinct, I couldn't tell. We talked about his college classes, Daniel's latest mischief, the football season. But beneath the surface of our words, I felt something invisible tugging between us. You always cook like this? He asked, gesturing to his plate. Only when I need to feel normal. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. Yeah, I get that. After dinner, he helped me clear the table. We fell into a rhythm, me washing, him drying. It felt natural, domestic, intimate in the way only silence can be. Then it happened again. His hand brushed mine as I passed him a plate. We both froze. A pause. A shared breath. I'm sorry, he said. For what? I don't know, for making this weird, maybe. It's not weird, I said, shutting off the faucet. Not unless we make it. He leaned against the counter watching me. I didn't come here with a plan, he confessed. I just didn't want to be anywhere else. I looked at him, really looked at him, and something inside me broke free, something I had buried beneath years of monotony and self-sacrifice. You've grown up so much, Evan. He gave a half smile. So have you. I laughed, almost embarrassed. Please, I'm over 50. You're what, 22? He tilted his head. That doesn't mean I don't see you. That sentence, it hit me deeper than I expected. Because for so long, I hadn't been seen. Not truly. Not as Caroline, just as Daniel's mom. A wife. A fixture in a quiet house. I don't know what this is, I whispered, but this isn't something I've ever let myself consider. I know, he said. And I'm not asking for anything. I feel safe with you, like I matter here. I turned to the window, staring out into the backyard, the night whispering against the glass. His reflection stood behind me, quiet, respectful, unsure. I should go, he said, before this turns into something we can't take back. I didn't stop him, but I didn't ask him to leave either. I simply nodded and offered, let me pack you some leftovers. When I handed him the container, our fingers brushed again, the same spark. This time, we both held the moment a second longer. Good night, Mrs. Cole. Good night, Evan. He left, and I stood there, with my hand still on the doorknob, heart racing in a house that suddenly felt alive in a way it hadn't in years. That night I lay awake. Not because I was guilty, but because for the first time in decades, I felt something I couldn't define, and I didn't want it to disappear. The next day passed in a daze. I smiled when Daniel returned. I nodded as he told me stories about the movie, about Evan leaving early. I did everything right, but inside, I was elsewhere. By evening, I was pacing. Then at 8 p.m., a message. Evan, can I stop by, just for a minute? Won't stay long. I stared at it. My thumbs hovered over the screen. Then I replied, Me. Sure, I'm home. He knocked, softer this time. When I opened the door, he looked more certain, but still waiting. I shouldn't have come last night, he said, but I'm not sorry I did. I stepped aside. Come in. He entered cautiously, stopping in the living room. I don't want to cause trouble, he began, but something changed in me last night. I didn't realize it before, but now I can't unfeel it. I said nothing. I couldn't. When I was younger, he continued, you always made people feel important. You were kind. You were warm. I didn't understand what that meant back then, but I do now. Evan, I know it's complicated. You're married. I respect that. I do. But I also know I wasn't the only one who felt it last night. I turned away, eyes on the fireplace mantel, on the family photos. I've lived my whole life for others, I said. For Daniel, for my husband, for the routine. But somewhere along the way, I forgot I was allowed to feel something for me. He didn't touch me. He didn't push. You didn't imagine it, he said gently. And I don't expect anything. I just needed you to know. I need time. Then I'll wait. He left again, quietly. But something had been said now. Something we couldn't take back. The days that followed were unlike any I'd ever lived. Quiet, but not in the same way as before. This quiet was electric, full of unspoken questions. A hush that felt alive, thrumming beneath every ordinary moment. I woke early each morning, brewed my coffee, and watched the pale dawn climb the kitchen walls. The radio played its usual soft jazz. Daniel came and went, filling the house with the noise I used to crave and now barely heard. My husband called every evening to say he loved me, to remind me that he'd be home in a few days. I answered like I always did. I said all the right words. But something in me had shifted. Every time the phone buzzed, my heart fluttered. Every time the door creaked, a rush of anticipation I could neither welcome nor deny. I didn't tell anyone, not Daniel, not my sister, who would have sensed it in a heartbeat. Not my friends at the library, who still thought of me as the sensible one. I held it close, like a small, fragile ember. A truth that belonged to me alone. One afternoon, unable to sit in the house a moment longer, I found myself driving with no destination. I let the streets guide me. The familiar turns I'd taken for years felt different now. Every stoplight, every passing field. I drove past the old school Daniel and Evan had attended, the playground that was now half swallowed by weeds. Memories floated up like ghosts. Birthday parties, school projects, Evan's gap-toothed grin, and then a voice in my mind. But he isn't that boy anymore. He was a man now. A man who had seen through every layer I'd wrapped around myself. Who had made me feel, for one breathless evening, like someone worth wanting. I didn't know what to do with that knowledge. So instead, I turned into the park, the one with the old elm tree and the pond that smelled of algae in summers past. I parked, walked to the bench in the shade, and sat down. The breeze lifted the hem of my sweater. I closed my eyes. After a long while, I pulled out my phone and typed, "Me. I'm here if you want to talk. Same bench, same park." I didn't expect a reply, and when none came immediately, I felt an odd kind of relief. It meant I could sit here in peace and pretend this was just a passing madness. But 15 minutes later, his car appeared. He stepped out slowly, hands in his pockets. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. He walked to the bench and sat beside me, leaving a respectful distance. Neither of us spoke at first. The moment felt so delicate, like a thread that could snap if we tugged too hard. "I didn't expect you to reach out," he said softly. "I know." I kept my eyes on the pond. "I've been thinking about everything." He waited, patient, unmoving. "About what it means to want something," I continued, "and how long I've gone without allowing myself to feel it." I turned to look at him. His expression was open, unguarded in a way most people never let themselves be. "I care about you," I said. "I can't pretend I don't. But I also care about my marriage, even if it's quiet." He nodded. "I never wanted to make you choose. I never wanted to pull you away from your life." "I know," I said. "But the truth is, I think I needed to be reminded that I still exist, that I'm still capable of feeling something." A gust of wind stirred the leaves overhead. Sunlight dappled his face, softening the angles I hadn't noticed when he was younger. "When I was young," he murmured, "you were the kindest person I knew. You made everyone feel seen, and I don't think you ever realized it was a gift." I swallowed. "You're the first person in a very long time who's looked at me like I was more than just a mother, just a wife." Silence fell between us. Not awkward, just true. I'm not going to act on this, I said quietly. Not the way it could have gone, but I won't pretend it didn't happen either. His eyes didn't waver. Then neither will I. We sat for a while longer, the hush of the park wrapping around us. A pair of children fed breadcrumbs to the ducks. A dog barked in the distance. It all felt heartbreakingly normal. When we finally stood, he pulled me into a hug. Not greedy, not expectant, just warm. A promise that whatever this was, it had mattered. And then he walked away. No backward glance, no lingering. That night, I returned home and set my keys on the kitchen counter. I stood there staring at the space he'd occupied in my mind and in my house. My husband called an hour later. I answered on the third ring, my voice steady. I told him I loved him. I did. In a way that was quiet and dependable, even if it was missing something I'd only just discovered. The following weeks passed in small, measured steps. Evan didn't come by. He didn't text again, but I thought of him every day, not as an illicit temptation, but as a reminder, a mirror, proof that some part of me still longed for more than the life I'd settled into. Sometimes I would find myself smiling for no reason, feeling the warm ache in my chest. And other times, I would stand in the kitchen, pressing a hand to my heart, wondering what I had almost allowed to happen. And always, I felt alive in a way I hadn't known was possible. One late afternoon, after grocery shopping, I carried my bags inside. The house was filled with the amber glow of sunset. I paused in the doorway, breathing it in. I thought about the versions of myself I had been. The young bride, sure that love meant sacrifice. The mother who folded herself smaller so her child could grow big. The woman who convinced herself contentment was the same as fulfillment. But there was another Caroline too. The Caroline who wanted to be seen, who wanted to feel, who wanted her heart to stir, even if it was terrifying. I set the groceries down, turned off the television, and made a cup of tea. No distractions this time, no excuses. I sat alone at the kitchen table and let the silence fill every corner of me. And for the first time in decades, I didn't feel small inside it. I felt whole. When my husband came home a few days later, he kissed my cheek and smiled. He didn't notice that something had changed. Maybe he never would. But I knew, and that was enough. That night after he fell asleep, I slipped out of bed and walked to the living room. I pulled the old photo album from the shelf and flipped to the page with the Lego tower. Daniel and Evan, 7 years old, a moment frozen in innocence. I rested my palm on the photograph, tracing the edges, remembering, not with regret, but with gratitude. Because in the end, it wasn't about romance. It wasn't about crossing a line or breaking a vow. It was about being reminded that I was still here, that I was still capable of wanting, of feeling, of stepping into the unknown. I closed the album and held it against my chest. The house around me hummed with its old, familiar quiet. But inside me, there was a new kind of peace, one that felt earned rather than imposed. I am still Caroline. I am still a wife, a mother, a woman who has lived many lives beneath the same roof. And I am ready, finally, to claim every part of her. Thank you for watching Seductive Chronicles. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever stood at the edge of something unexpected and felt your heart awaken, know you're not alone. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs to remember they matter too.